Diane, this is Dr. Jester. We're going to go over your document here. And let's take a quick look at what we do have. First, let's look at the Lopes-Wright report. So if we go and view the details of this, here's what we have. So as you see this number, this is 34% quoted text. Again, that is too high. It cannot be over 30%. Should not be over 20%. So you've got to keep that below 30. How do you do that? Well, number one, you cannot be quoting a lot in order to keep that percentage down. But here's what I'm running onto in the paper. You got a good thesis, and as far as discussing church planning and leadership in general, that's good. But I'll deal with content issues here in just a moment. Here's the problem I'm noticing throughout. I want you to see this. You've got a beginning quote and an ending quote. There's no source listed. Up here you've got an ending quote for something, no beginning quote, no source listed. And as I go down through here, I've got, there's no source listed anywhere for any of your quotations. You got a quote right here, no source. You've got a verse of scripture here that's not standard. You need to specifically say what version of scripture you're listing. This is another quote that has no source listed. Another one here, ending quotes, no beginning. Another quote, no source listed, and I can keep going on. It's just throughout the paper. You have no footnotes, no sources listed. You have a reference section, but you've got to give the specifics on where you're borrowing that information from. And then the other thing is here, you've got too many quotes. So I can suggest that instead of quoting these scriptures, just make a reference to them. Acts 12:24 says the church needs to multiply and increase. You don't have to say all of those, you don't have to quote that scripture, just reference the scripture. And that'll cut down on your quote percentages. Again, that's the problem throughout the document. Now, the other problem here is this. Let's look over at the instructions. So the instructions tell you to select 7 key passages of scripture regarding prayer and church planning and evaluate their significance. You're basically focusing on leadership, and you haven't really singled out certain scriptures and focused on them. You're focusing on leadership. There's hardly anything on target people or location selection and church planning processes. How are you going to do that? You need to include more of that. You don't identify any cultural distinctions or basic cultural group characteristics. So you're not even following the outline that's given to you in the instructions. You just kind of went down a pathway of leadership and chose to follow that. So you need to be very distinctive in discussing the scripture passages. Just go ahead and list those out. Say, these are the following scriptures I'm going to discuss. And we begin with number 1. That talks about prayer and how that relates to the significance of church planning. And number 2, this is the way we're going to do this and talk about this. And then how do you select to target people? What leads you? I know the Spirit of God certainly does, but how do you select that? And then you've got to talk about cultural distinctions. You can't just bypass that. That's a big part of what this whole process is about. And unfortunately, with the high percentages of quotations, you're going to have to fix this. You're going to have to make sure that if you quote something, you also reference it. Otherwise, that gets us all in trouble. So I am going to reassign this to you, and you'll have a week to finish it.